Hi, today we're talking about shitposts. My understanding of a shitpost may be biased and may be influenced by what I see on the internet, so let's get back to the basics. Let's read some actual dictionary explanations of what a shitpost is. As you will notice, they vary. They do not actually know. Like, here's the first one, and it comes from Wiktionary, whatever. Shitpost. A worthless or superficially meaningless post on a message board, newsgroup, or other online discussion platform, often intended to derail or distract from relevant conversation. But it also has a second meaning, according to this, which is a seemingly worthless or superficially meaningless image, video, or piece of text posted to a social media platform that is intended to be humorously or ironically enjoyed. And I think in 90% of the cases in modern online culture, it refers to the second one. It's not meant to distract. It's not meant to disable your opponent in a discussion. It's meant to make people laugh. So it's basically a meme, but like worse quality or just something very absurd. That's what I've noticed from most of the things that people refer to as shitpost online. Another definition from the Cambridge Dictionary is something put on the internet that is not especially funny or interesting and does not make much sense or does not have anything to do with what is being discussed, especially in order to make it difficult for other people to discuss something. I personally think that, especially when it comes to internet culture, words change meaning very quickly, and right now, if you look at things that are posted under the name of posts, they're not unfunny. They're just very absurd or very niche or just very silly. So it's like a meme, but meant for a specific group of people that will say like, wow, this is really bad, I love it. That's my definition of a shitpost. And then another one from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it's about it being a verb, which is to post something online, such as a comment, video, or a meme that is deliberately absurd, provocative, or offensive. Not all posts are offensive, so it depends, but they are provocative in most cases. So because we're analyzing the history of posts today, I thought we're gonna go way back and start off with like the ancient cultures. In my opinion, one of the oldest examples of shitposting was graffiti. And I don't mean like signing your own name, but deliberately making either obscene inscriptions or images or just really stupid ones or meaningless ones on people's walls. So a good example of that could be Lucilla ex corpore lucrum faciebat, which was written in the Basilica of Pompeii, and it means Lucilla made money from her body. So basically, Lucilla's a hoe. Another one from Pompeii goes, Marcellus praenestinam amat et non curatur, which translates to Marcellus loves Praenestina, but she doesn't care for him. Again, why would you write something like that? Absolutely no reason. Then there is this one from Hadrian's Wall, which was discovered quite recently, and they translated it to Secundinus the shitter, which I think is a prime example of a post, especially considering the connection. But then they also wrote some pretty ones. So they wrote a lot of poems, and one guy who was in love with a lady, and he was, from what we understand, her ex and did not want her to get with anyone else, wrote a beautiful poem that goes like this. I bind you, Theodotis, daughter of Eos, to the tail of the snake and to the mouth of the crocodile, and the horns of the ram, and the poison of the asp, and the whiskers of the cat, and the forepart of the god. So that you cannot ever have intercourse with another man, nor be fucked, nor be buggered, nor fellet, and not do anything for pleasure with another man, if it is not me alone, Ammonian son of Hermitaris. Beautiful poem. Very direct, very straight to the point. So, as we can see, the ancient graffitis varied from longer ones to shorter ones to obscene ones to just inscriptions of people's names. There was a lot of graffitis that just said, name was here, which is, it's incredible how old that thing goes. It's the first graffiti that anyone has ever made in their life, and it still goes on after literally thousands of years. Okay, let's move on to the medieval times. I think a good example of medieval posting are the marginalia. So marginalia were little notes, little doodles on the margins of manuscripts. There were actually two types of marginalia. One type was intended to illustrate the text. So for example, you would have a medical text and then you would have an illustration of a medical procedure or condition. The other type was people commenting on the text as they went. So they were leaving their thoughts and their notes for people that would read it after them, which is really cute. But my favorite marginalia are somewhere in between because they're clearly an integral part of the text, so they must have been made as the text was being copied, but at the same time, they absolutely do not illustrate the text. In most cases, they're just for fun, which is, again, what a post essentially is. Like, check out those examples. Cat in a snail shell. Okay. Rabbits, dogs, and a human snail fighting. Valid. A letter pointing straight to a manfish's ass. Valid. The beauty of some of those cannot be understated. These are the OG. Next up, we have Hieronymus Bosch, who was a 15th, 16th century Dutch painter. He was known for having a soft spot for all things bizarre. He's the kind of a guy that will make you look at a painting and then you'll just be like, I have no idea what I've just seen. And you may have seen some of his work, but I guarantee you have not seen all of the weird shit that is going on in his paintings. And I think a good example of how confusing he is that art historians are still debating whether he actually meant for all these things to have like a hidden secret meaning, or if it was just for like entertainment and pure amusement, which again would make it a shitpost in my opinion. Like a musical butt, cool. An ear infection, cool. This, okay, no questions. There might be some slight anti-church propaganda. These guys are cute, but they're kind of in their own bubble. I had to. Everything is just so complex that you don't even know where to start. And I don't think it's even possible to unpack these properly because the guy probably didn't know what he's doing either. He was probably just high. Then we have Giuseppe Arcimboldo. I have to say, I stumbled upon his work when I was a little kid because I think it was in one of those artsy magazines for children that teach you art history. I don't know, my mom bought me this. It was pretty cool. And I think it appeared there and I loved it as a kid. I was obsessed. I think I made my own version with like scraps of fabric or something. And it took me years to actually realize when this guy existed because my child brain did not place him on a timeline. It wasn't until fairly recently that I realized, no, these things are actually really old. So this guy was a 16th century Italian painter. And as you can see, he was best known for creating portraits that were made of objects. And tell me this is not like the OG posting. There was no reason for those paintings to exist. Art critics at the time genuinely did not know what to think of him. Some were like, yeah, there is some merit to it. Some were like, no, it's a post. So like this guy's cheek is literally an onion. This can't be very serious, can it? I mean, don't get me wrong, artistically it's like very good. Most of these things actually are pretty good, but it's just the intention behind it. What was he trying to convey? Not much. It was just fun. Next up, we have a treat. So this painting is Triptych of the Micot family from between 1539 to 1559 by Jan Cornelis Vermeyen. And I would personally call this one an accidental post because when you look at a painting, it's just a beautiful painting, a family, a religious scene, not unusual compared to other works from the period. However, do not miss out on this epic cat shirt on the left side of the painting. This guy's literally wearing a cat shirt. Okay, granted, it was not yet like t-shirt era, so he's just wearing a doublet that is printed with cats. But look at the detail. I don't know much about the painting. My assumption is that it must be a symbol of the family because there is this tablecloth right beneath him that I think also has a similar pattern, but doesn't it look just glorious? It's fantastic. Next up comes Joseph Ducret. You may best know this guy from this stale-ass meme, but he actually produced a number of self-portraits in a similar style. And what's really funny to me is that he originally started with respectable high-end portraits. For example, he made this quite famous portrait of Marie Antoinette that was shown to Louis XVI before they even got married to let him know what she looks like, which is like pretty big responsibility for an artist, I must say. But when you look at his portraits, I would say they do have a little bit of that post flavor. The only difference being, since those were his self-portraits, they probably were not shown around too much, especially in an era where he couldn't just exhibit it in a gallery. So maybe a post is not the best way of calling it, but also who cares? So the guy went from portraying Marie Antoinette, the future Queen of France, to literally not caring in the 1780s, 1790s and just going for this, which is epic and fair. When it comes to the 19th century, rather than a particular artist that I could say is a good example of posting, I would say there was a whole art style that could be described as such, and that's obviously satirical drawings. They were not invented in the 19th century, but thanks to many magazines and newspapers having more and more volumes and more copies sold, and also thanks to a London-based satirical magazine Punch, satirical drawings started being circulated in much bigger numbers than in previous centuries. So I think it was a century where satirical drawings were more popular than they ever were before. Now, those drawings were not necessarily posts because they were usually relevant to what was currently going on, but some of the illustrations definitely give us those vibes nowadays when they're completely out of context and if you don't know what they're supposed to be about. This one showing a woman carrying two children in her skirts. This guy, whoever he was. Of course, Punch was not the only magazine that published fun stuff. Here's another fun drawing that's probably from the turn of the century from a completely different source, and it shows different facial hair and what it means for a person. And then we have this interesting article from 1880s, I think, about typographical art. We wish it to be distinctly understood that the letterpress department of this paper is not going to be trampled on by any tyrannical crowd of artists in existence. We mean to let the public see what we can lay out in our own typographical line. The following are from studies in passions and emotions, no copyright. So these are basically emoticons. These are 19th century emoticons, and they are so much more interesting than what we actually use. I think the only problem is how many lines it takes to create a single face. But I absolutely love the astonished one. Now, when it comes to the 1900s, we have to remember that before the internet, the power of creating and distributing funny images was not only in hands of the media. People could also create and distribute funny images. And in 1900s, in the early 20th century, that was often done by presenting each other with cards. So you would have humorous cards that are supposed to convey some sort of a message. What I've noticed was a popular theme in the 1900s was this one. May all your troubles be little ones. So, which is obviously a pun, considering you can have lots of babies that are problematic for you. But this came in a variety of different versions and different flavors, and I find it interesting that it's not just women that are depicted in those. Or it's the little things in life that count. We also have this card, which is before and after marriage, and I don't personally find it funny, but it's a good example of the kind of the humor that people had around 1910. Okay, 1920s, 1930s, what happened? I think this could be credited to reacting to the horrors of the First World War, or maybe with analphabetism declining, or with the fact that much more media and much more materials from the era survive. But I see a real surge in humorous images in the 20s and 30s. Not only do we have images, satirical drawings as we've had before, we also start having whole comic strips. For example, there is this whole series Flapper Fanny Says in the Sunday. Though again, Flapper Fanny was culturally relevant to what was happening in that time, so I'm not sure if it can be called a post, but there is much more humorous stuff that we have from that era. This one from The Punch says, "Mother entertaining Christmas visitor. Ah, I hear my little Bobby coming in. I do so want you to tell me which side of the family you think he takes after." And obviously he's wearing a massive nose. This one's pretty cute. It's Ice Rink Crisis. First limpet. So someone that's like barely holding on. "Would you mind passing around me, madam? I'm only a beginner." Second limpet. "I'm afraid I must ask you to pass around me, sir. I haven't even begun." This one's from 1930. So, Flapper Fanning Wisdom from 1925. "The less you know about some boys, the more you think of them." And another one. "Short skirts are here to stay, and you only know the calf of it. Ha ha ha." So again, puns, wisdoms, that kind of stuff. We also have this meme that was quite popular on the internet a couple of years ago, and some media outlets started referring to it as the first meme in history, which I don't think is accurate. We actually do know a lot of memes from pre-1921 that could equally be considered memes. For example, the one I just showed you from 1910 with a woman crossing the street. But this is infinitely funnier, so maybe that's why it's considered the first meme. But we also have this one from the 1920s. "As your roommate describes her, as she is," which I think is a very traditional meme format. Again, I'm not sure how posty those are because they're quite normal. They're not like completely absurd. I love this one because again, it follows the exact same format. Something something versus now or versus in reality, but it's also completely relevant today. "Just among us girls, the eternal problem. When mother was young, for land's sakes, what will I cook for supper? But now, what the heck to order? That's the question." The only difference is she sat with a menu, whereas if it was a modern meme, a modern post, she would be ordering via Uber Eats. So I just find it so interesting that some things that people were noticing as a sort of generational shift back then is also what people are still talking nowadays in regards to new generations. Okay, another one that I think is 100% relevant today, and it's something that we also make memes of. You know, in movies when you have this scene,
"Where do you want to go?"
I am going home.
Where the movie ends and the main character is in a taxi and the guy is like, "Where to?" And she's like, "Home. I'm going home."
"Where to?"
"Home. I'm going home."
"Woman, I don't know where the fuck you live."
And then check out this one. "Where to, miss?" he said. "Home, James." Which may not be a meme per se, but it's just funny considering the modern context. We were just laughing about it like last year, and now this already happened in the 1920s. This is another one that I found quite funny. It's an image of an old lady in a bed. She's getting handed a baby, and she's like, "Oh no, I had gallstones." Like, this one's not mine. I was just here to have my gallstones removed. And then another very modern one, and I think it's so fascinating how they just predicted the future, because it says, "When we all have pocket telephones, when running for a train, when your hands are full, when it is raining, yes, yes, hello, who is it? At a concert, shh, when you are given a baby to hold, that bell is frightening the poor mite, when you are being married." I have personally been to so many events and so many important places where people did not turn their phone off and it just started ringing in the middle of it. So the conclusion here is, we shall certainly be rung up at the most awkward moments in our daily lives, which is 100% correct. Okay, funny things aside, sadly, as with everything that we have from the past, a lot of it is quite sexist and not very nice. For example, we have this drawing of a man sleeping with his middle-aged wife and dreaming of a young wife, and it says pleasant dreams. Then we also have this one. She's got a lot of cheek, ha ha ha. 1940s were famous for the Kilroy meme. So it was a World War II meme that started off in the US and was just spread around the world. It was just a drawing that was basically done everywhere, and it became a true post, I would say. It did not do anything, it did not mean anything, it was not funny in any way, it was just something that you would draw somewhere and leave. And people mostly consider it a meme because it got translated into different languages and because it spread so wide, but I personally think it does have a little bit of that shitpost flavor just because of how absurd it is and how little meaning it has. We've also got this one from 1940s, which is again just a humorous card. But then we also have this one. I found this one on eBay. I think it's 1950s. And it's again a play on the 1900s meme, "It's the little things that count," that was about babies, but this one says, "Use your head, it's the little things that count." And we're gonna stop right there because I do think the later evolution of memes and humorous images is way too complex for this video. It probably should be a separate video because there will be too many examples. And also because it's recent history, so we mostly remember what happened. I don't need to show troll face here, we all know what happened. So I think in terms of history, we're gonna stop here. Again, as almost everything I mentioned on this channel, I'm just always surprised how far back it goes. Obviously, people always had a sense of humor. They were not those stiff puppets. But considering that we still have the same sense of humor as two Roman dudes that were scratching something on the surface of the Hadrian's Wall stone like 2000 years before Christ, it is always astonishing to me. I once traveled to a French chateau, I don't remember the name of it, but it was quite old, and we were just walking around with my family and we went on a rooftop terrace because they allowed you to go there, and the walls were completely covered with 18th century graffiti because they had dates, so I knew it's 18th century, and it was just people's names. It was just all of the rebellious kids and cousins that visited the castle and went on the rooftop and were just like, quick or the nanny is gonna get us. And I find it very endearing that we are such simple creatures that the same things make us laugh and the same mechanisms make us laugh, and that nothing is new in the universe and posts have existed for thousands of years, but just the form in which they are distributed has changed significantly because now we have the internet, and probably that's why the amount of that kind of content is also increasing. So this is my conclusion. Thanks for watching and bye!